impact that technology has had on industries all over the world cannot be understated. Its influence is prevalent and has transformed the way in which companies operate as artificial intelligence, automation, and big data begin to take hold. The air freight and logistic industries are certainly no exception. Increasingly, logistic companies are seeking partners to further investigate application and deployment of robotics and automated vehicles. Robotics are poised to become a major trend in the industry. They are already popping up at cargo terminals and warehouses, freeing humans from everyday mundane activities, leaving humans to deal with more complex customer service-oriented functions. Hello everyone, I am Reggie John and this is Logistic Tech Dialogues presented by Kale Logistics Solutions. This is our new weekly dialogue on innovations and technologies that make logistics move faster and deliver better. Logistic Tech Dialogues is brought to you in partnership with Kale Logistics Solutions, a trusted global logistic IT solutions provider for several Fortune 500 companies worldwide. My guest today is Dr. Suraj Nair, founder and Chief Technology Officer of Speedcargo Technologies. Speedcargo Technologies is a deep tech startup providing products and solutions for the air freight and logistics sectors. Suraj holds a PhD in robotics and artificial intelligence from the Technical University of Munich in Germany. For close to a decade, he has been active in the European robotics space and has contributed to robotics projects in the automotive, medical, and aerospace sectors. In 2015, he moved to Singapore and has served as a principal investigator at Create under the National Research Foundation, which is with Singapore Prime Minister's office. Suraj founded the Speedcargo in 2015 as a project funded by Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore and National Research Foundation, or NRF. Suraj, welcome to Logistic Tech Dialogues and great to have you for this conversation.
Thank you, Reggie, and it's always a pleasure to speak to you. So I'm looking forward to this chat.
Let us start with briefly talking about Speedcargo before we begin talking about your three products and the technologies behind them. Tell us about about your company, about yourself, and the reasons why you started Speedcargo.
So I think you've introduced myself already, so I won't get into that again. But I was mainly active in the European robotics space for more than 10 years, and I moved to Singapore in 2015 to start a new robotics group as an extension of our activities in Munich. So I stumbled upon an industry-related call for a problem statement from the cargo industry. And this problem statement was announced by the Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore. And they were doing a challenge called Aviation Challenge. And we responded to this call and we got selected to participate and we got funded for this. And the problem was basically to automate the very laborious process of building and breaking down of ULDs, mainly pallets for air cargo specifically. So we started working on this concept. It was very, very focused in terms of robotics on how to actually do the build up and breakdown of ULD pallets automatically with robots. And that's how the project started. And it was funded by CAS Singapore. But there were a lot of industrial stakeholders who were reviewing the project every 6 months. And this included Singapore Airlines, SATS, Dinata, DHL, the Association for Cargo Agents in Singapore, and for example, players like Usain Logistics. So what I'm trying to say is it was a problem which came from the industry. The problem statement came from the industry, and the industry basically helped us to build technology for this space. So whatever we built after 2 years in 2018 was very well accepted by the industry. As a result, we got another round of funding from the Prime Minister's office directly to take whatever we had developed as a technology to market. So we did two things with that. We used the funding to make the technology into a product by deploying it at Changi Airport and working closely with stakeholders like SAS and Dinata. And we also build a pipeline to formally establish a company in terms of attracting investors in this field. And we successfully managed to start Speedcargo Technologies as an independent deep tech startup in the mid of in actually July 2020, and the whole team moved to the company in December 2020.
How serious are issues like revenue leakage, inefficient operations in the air cargo operations, and how do Speedcargo propose to address them? Because these are the problems that has been identified by the industry, and you've been asked to find a solution to that. So how serious are this, and what is the level of or intensity of solutions that you bring on board to control revenue leakage as well as to bring in efficiencies in operations?
Like I started by saying that the origin of Speedcargo started as a very hardcore robotics project. Why I say hardcore? Because we were doing high mix, high volume, heavy manipulation robotics. But when we are trying to solve this problem, we realize that there are many other problems to solve first before robotics becomes even relevant in this space. And one important part was digitization of physical cargo. And there were several value propositions in terms of digitization of the physical cargo. Why I mean physical cargo? Because most of the digitization efforts even today are to mainly focus on digitizing the paper. But you forget about the physical cargo because the physical cargo has a lot to talk about itself. And one value proposition which was across the board accepted was revenue leakage. And I think you know why it happens, because forwarders a lot of times book cargo with a certain declared dimensions, but when they bring the cargo to the warehouse, the dimensions are different. And this sometimes happens because of deliberate under declaration, but sometimes it can also be because of us, or sometimes the cargo when it's booked is not even manufactured. But because of this discrepancy, the airline suffers a lot of loss in revenue. So with accurate dimensioning, you can try to mitigate this problem as to a large extent. But it's not just about the technology, how to actually embed the technology into the workflow of the customer. They can digitize every single piece of cargo efficiently and extremely fast is basically the key challenge. And that is what we have managed to address with Cargo Eye. When we started developing our first solution, which is Cargo Eye, which is for cargo dimensioning plus, and that's why we call it a cargo digitization solution. The main design criteria was because there were many other players operating in the market, but they were all mainly legacy system and hardware centric system. Ours is a more software centric approach. So we are 80% software, 20% hardware, while the others are 80% hardware, 20% software. And why I say software-centric approach is because we wanted to allow the cargo terminal operator to implement this in a way that they can do 100% dimensioning. Because only when you do 100% dimensioning, you will get a clear picture about your revenue leakages. So we had two challenges. First, to make the system extremely interesting in terms of its form factor, very small out of the box, easy to install, easy to calibrate, easy to operate, but at the same time, try to make it affordable in terms of the pricing model, because the market is operating at a different price, and the way the cargo terminal operations work in terms of low margin, fragmentation, very difficult in terms of making investments, especially during the COVID time. It becomes very difficult for them to adopt it at scale. So that is what we have tried to solve with Cargo Eye, to give them a possibility to digitize so that they can scale it within their network. Because what we try to give back to the customer is statistics with respect to the data. So for example, if you see my background, you will see these dashboards there. So it is very less about the hardware, but more about what you can do with this data. And with this data, we can tell you who is under declaring, which forwarders are under declaring, which airline is losing the most amount of money. Does this happen periodically or it happens every day? So a lot of these statistics can be pulled out from the data.
Suraj, it looks like a perfect match. It's a perfect marriage of software and hardware. And your tagline is digitize your cargo and automate your cargo operations. And these happen at warehouses and cargo terminals. Are they as easy as we think?
Well, it is definitely not easy. I would rather say it is very, very complex, because both you and I know that the cargo side of business in aviation, it really has a 30-year innovation gap. And this is not just an innovation gap in terms of the actual physical process, but also mindset, right? So although across the board, including operations, where they don't have any problem in admitting the fact that cargo operations are quite lagging in terms of technology adoption and how they do business. The mindset to change is the difficult problem to crack. So, for example, we have been lucky working with some very, very like-minded and future-looking leaders in the cargo space. But we have also been extremely lucky because they have also managed in certain organizations to inject it to their ops. So the ops and the C-level are quite aligned, which allows us to transform the operations using technology rather easy. But I would not say that this is a phenomenon which you will see everywhere outside Singapore. And we have been in that there is sometimes a lot of resistance from the operations to change. It's not that they don't want the technology to come in or they don't like it, but the change is what they fear. Because, for example, it is very difficult to inject a technology as is and make everything work seamlessly. So there are times where you might need to work with two systems, or you might need to have two mental models when you're trying to approach your ops, at least for a certain time when the technologies can get stabilized. Yeah. So this is where you need more support from both the C-level and both the ops. So I think change management, a strengthening of the change management process for the cargo terminal operations is something which we think is the biggest challenge we have. It is not really the technology.
Let's talk a bit more in detail about your three products and the technologies behind them. And let's go one by one. Cargo Eye, it is about instant and accurate dimensioning and creating digital records. Tell us how it is done, and is the same for every customer, or what is the level of customization that you do from like you have a customer called Dinata, and how it would be different to a Changi airport, which has got a different customer who operates that.
Cargo Eye, like you said, it's a digitization tool. It's a digitization system. Why we say it's a digitization system? Because it does dimensioning, but it also captures the pictures of the cargo in up to 4K resolution from each side, which can help in auditing, in damage detection, etc. We can also do deep learning based semantic extraction on the cargo, for example, labels like dangerous goods, this side up. We can identify what kind of packaging material the cargo is made up of, like, for example, if it is wooden, if it's styrofoam, if there is a skid at the base, because these kind of information helps us do planning at a different level at the next stage. So Cargo Eye is basically a digitization system. In terms of technology behind Cargo Eye, we are using the state-of-the-art technology in time of flight 3D vision, and we have developed the software from scratch. Yeah, spending a lot of time on the ground for the last 4 to 5 years on what works, what doesn't, and what are the real challenges. So there's a lot of advanced 3D sensing. There is a lot of computer vision, but there's a lot of thought in terms of the product development from a software architecture point of view. And this is where we help. The software is completely cloud-based. We use the Microsoft Azure cloud, and we are using the latest technology in terms of cloud connectivity. For example, we are using the Microsoft IoT Hub and IoT Edge technology, which makes the data which we capture on the ground available in a very fast, secure, and scalable way in the customer's backend infrastructure, allowing them to do real-time analysis of, like I said, different types of statistics, different types of upstream, downstream information, which they can use for real-time decision making, but also long-term planning. So that is about Cargo Eye. And I must also say that in terms of the audience of Cargo Eye, in terms of the users, it is applicable for the airlines, the ground handlers, the large forwarders, the smaller forwarders. And this is why we have a suite of products in terms of Cargo Eye, in terms of its capabilities and the form factor. We have 4 camera systems where we can scan large jet engines. We have used our usual 3 camera systems, which is usually typically used at the truck docks of large ground handlers or forwarders. Then we have smaller systems, which are 2 camera systems, which can be either on a moving platform. We have a single camera system, which can be on a tabletop. And of course, we are soon going to launch a handheld tablet version, which can be used by smaller shippers or smaller forwarders. And all this is basically exposed to the customer through a unified Speedcargo Cloud API. So it's about talking to our API. So no matter which Cargo Eye you use, you will get the same facility from the cloud backend.
Let's come to Cargo Mind, and it is about real-time capacity optimization, thus increasing or optimizing yield. How does it manage multiple ULDs, keeping in mind regulations, types of cargo, safety, compliance with the weight and balance of aircraft?
So Cargo Mind is the brain of the Speedcargo technology suite. It is the most complex part or at least one of the most complex parts of the technology we've built. So what it does is it's basically tries to optimize cargo boxes into a capacity. A capacity can be a ULD, pallet or container. It can be a warehouse space. It can be a container or any other capacity, any 3D volume which can be defined mathematically. We can plan into this 3D volume with boxes. Yeah. But this itself so this is usually a bin packing problem in the mathematical space, which is already a NP hard problem, which means it's a hard problem. Now the problem becomes much more complex and hard for us when we try to put in more constraints. Like you said, we cannot just pack things to occupy the maximum volume into a capacity like a ULD, but we have to adhere to all the different regulations of, for example, IATA++. So for example, weight and balance, cargo down, light the cargo up. If a cargo is stackable, not stackable, we cannot put any cargo on top. If that cargo is not tiltable, we cannot tilt the cargo. There are segregation rules. The segregation rules are defined by IATA, but trust me, every airline has its own segregation rules on top. For example, when we were planning for Scandinavian Airlines, there was a lot of important segregation rules for fish. When we are planning for, when we are discussing with Cathay, they have their own requirements. Turkish has their own. So there's a lot of segregation. Then we have dangerous goods requirements that the cargo has to be packed in certain way. Two different types of dangerous goods cannot be on the same pallet. So there are a multitude of constraints we need to solve. So while we are trying to optimize capacity, we need to solve for a lot of these constraints and try to ensure that we can still get the best capacity utilization. And that is what CargoMind does. So it's a complex, non-linear, multi-constraint solving algorithm, which solves this extremely complex problem, but it solves it very fast. So I'll give you statistics, and this has taken us a lot of time to develop. I can pack a main deck PMC with high mix cargo in less than 700 microseconds on a very generous laptop, a very standard laptop. Yeah, we can pack a complete 747-400 freighter in 2 or 3 seconds. Yeah. And this process usually takes hours. So we give the power to the ground handler and the airlines to use this tool to keep packing as they get more and more rich information. So that is basically the idea of CargoMind. It is a capacity optimization engine, but it is operations ready. So it provides you a digitally planned pallet, which can actually be built in real operations, taking into account business constraints, taking into account regulatory constraints, but also taking into account the actual physical constraints which happen on the ground on a day-to-day basis at a ground handler. And this is what sets us apart from other people who are trying to do capacity optimization, because there are a lot of people trying to do this, but they always plan a ULD and they go upstream into the customer's business. We go downstream, we go to the operations, because if you build a digital pallet in your computer and your ground ops are not able to replicate it on the ground, your aircrafts are not going to fly full, and your bottom line of the company will not change. After 2 months, you will realize, hey, nothing is changing. That's because what you're planning does not work on the ground, because the ground is cargo operations on the ground have a lot of nuances. Everybody builds an overhang a different way. There is a lot of decision making happening. There is a lot of intangible knowledge in the packer set. So that's all gone into a product design on how to bring these people on the ground on board the technology.
Yeah, you have called it as a CargoMind, and you also have a plugin called Assemble, which enables the manual buildup of high-density pallets digitally planning using CargoMind. How does this work, the plugin work?
So the plugin was basically a realization we had once we started spending a lot of time on the ground at multiple ground handlers. Because like I said, Speedcargo was always about the robot, right? We already have a POC with the cargo arm, which I talk about later, but the industry is not yet ready for it. But it will be ready soon and come with a big bang with the robotics soon. But in the meantime, we need to allow the people on the ground to build a sophisticated computer generated pallet. So that is what Assemble is all about. It is a man-machine interface which converts your digitally planned pallet to something which can be built on the ground. So it is basically a handheld device with a application which instructs the people on the ground to build the pallet in a certain way. Yeah. And and this is a very complex process which we realized while working on it, because you cannot always force the person on the ground to follow your instructions 100%, because a lot of things change and things are dynamic on the ground. So we built Assemble as a communication engine where we provide information to the ground staff on how to search and retrieve cargo and how to build the cargo on the ULD in terms of guidelines. Yeah, and we are not forcing them. So there is a lot of flexibility. So it is really a man-machine interaction system, which allows us to realize the pallets on the ground while taking into account exceptions which happen on the ground, which can be modified and sent back to cargo mine for the final manifesting. It also helps the person on the ground to audit each and every step of the build-up process, which is currently a black box. People really don't know how pallets are built. There is no digital record. Now you can actually see how with Cargo Eye and Cargo Mind, you basically get a complete visual journey of your cargo, right from your truck dock. How did it go into storage? From the storage, how was it put on the pallet? So you can see a visual build timeline of your pallet getting built up. So Assemble also helps capture these key milestones of the build-up process, which can be later used for quality control, which can be used for auditing. And it is also a very good information suite which the customer or the ground handler can sell back or provide back to their customer.
And the third one is third of product that you have is Cargo Arm, which is your robot and automates cargo handling, build-up and breakdown of ULDs and provide integration using automated guided vehicles or conveyor systems. Tell us how advanced this automation process is at cargo warehouses.
So we have a POC which we completed successfully at SATS in Singapore, which is a very large operation. They handle around 2 million tons of cargo a year. And what we managed to do there is we managed to show that we can build high mix, high volume main deck and lower deck pallets in around between 20 to 40 minutes. So that's using the Cargo Arm technology. So the Cargo Arm technology is basically advanced gantry robotic system, which is highly scalable. It can manipulate cargo up to 3.6 tons with a precision of 0.1 millimeters, and it can move up to 4 meters per second. Yeah. So this is the capability of the robotic system. But the challenge really is designing the gripping system, because cargo, unlike at e-commerce warehouse and all these robotics warehouses you see, the cargo in air freight is very, very unstructured. It is high mix, it's high volume, and it is a very high payload. So in robotics, after you cross the 30 to 50 kilo barrier, robotics changes completely. Yeah. Then we are going into a territory where you're talking about very high payload, safe manipulation. So there are a lot of challenges in terms of motion planning, dynamics, because you're working with very, very sophisticated physics, a lot of constraints. So this is what we have tried to solve in Cargo Arm. It is really advanced, high level and low level robot control, specifically for air freight like operations. And we have designed some very sophisticated gripping system which handle, for example, in a warehouse like SATS, it handles up to 80% of the cargo weight. So that is what the Cargo Arm currently is. It is completed its POC stage, and we are currently in discussion with some very big players to launch this into the market. But this is a long process. This will take at least 2 years from now.
You know, Suraj, we've been talking about what we call is the island of innovations. We see that there are certain portions in the air cargo logistics or logistic value chain. There are certain stakeholders really actually innovate. But the idea is, how do we have that seamless connection of different stakeholders to ensure that information passes through different stakeholders and then brings in that efficiencies? How do we bring in that connection among these three to a customer? But I don't know whether a customer like Dynata employs all these three products of yours.
Yes, at Dynata, we have all the three products. I would say Cargo Eye, Cargo Mind, and Assemble, not the Cargo Arm yet. And these are all already connected through a unified data layer, which is the Speedcargo cloud through APIs. And the Speedcargo cloud talks to the customer's cargo management system. So I remember we were speaking on another juncture, and there was a very important point made by the CEO of Cargo One, where they are also connecting with different systems, and there are a lot of standards being developed. So what we also see is that there are a lot of standards being developed, and there are people waiting for standards. But if you want to actually connect to the value chain, it is not that difficult, because today most of the large or relatively large or even medium-sized player are working with, at least from the IT backend point of view, near to state of the art. Yeah. So when we talk about APIs, the API concept is quite well established in the cargo community. So you can have multiple systems, but as long as you can expose APIs, you can connect to them. So that is also our philosophy and approach. We provide very general purpose APIs. And if you want to connect to our system, even if you have a legacy system, you can just talk to the APIs. And that is, at least in the short term, that would be our approach, to go and provide support in terms of API connectivity between two systems. So it's basically interoperability despite of incompatibility.
Robotics are actually a heavily capital intensive investment that terminals have to make. Of course, the long-term benefits are really huge. What is the level of interest from cargo terminal operators into cargo and use of robotics at the cargo warehouses? Of
course, it is capex intensive, but if I look at it, it is not as intensive as, for example, an MHS or ETV system. But yes, and it is very important for us to understand how investment is made within a large organization like SATS or Denata. Usually they make infrastructure investment, and that's an investment for say 20 or 30 years. And then they don't change. Yeah. And that's why you end up seeing older systems in large warehouses. And it is not their fault, because they would not make heavy capex investments every 5 years. So it is the same for the robot. So as long as there is value, they will invest. Yeah, and we have established a value proposition. But one of the things what we have done as a company, of course, we have launched the Cargo Eye, Cargo Mind, and Assemble, because even if a ground handler wants to deploy the robotics, they first have to do the digitization and optimization. And only after that, the robotics becomes relevant. But when that robotics becomes relevant, we also have worked on a lot of commercial models to make adaptation of such capex intensive systems practical for the ground handler. So there are different concepts we are currently exploring in terms of how do we license the hardware, how do we license the software, and how do we plug in the hardware, which is the capex part. So there can be lease modeling, there can be indirect financing. So there are different ways in which we are trying to see how, when we are ready with the cargo arm, how to position in the market. There is also concepts where we are exploring like infrastructure as a service. So for example, I guess you have already heard about the plans in Singapore. In fact, the construction is already going on for the new Changi terminal, which is going to be larger than the entire existing airport. The Changi East terminal, which is going to be built, is currently under construction, will have its new air freight facility. So we are also in discussion with stakeholders on how to now equip this new facility with this kind of robotics technology and provide it as an infrastructure as a service to the ground handlers, where the ground handlers do not have to invest, but the investment is from the airport itself. As a shipper, if someone actually books a freight on a marketplace and then information is passed down the lane, at what point in time that you are able to have that information, and what point in time you come into picture, or some of your products come into the picture? That's a good question. The entry point to our system, if you want to digitize the cargo, is Cargo Eye. Although the three products don't depend on each other. Cargo Mind can work as long as there is clean data, dimensioning data from Cargo Eye or any other source. But this is also one of the problems we want to address. We want to get information as early as possible so that you can start doing planning. Yeah. And as of now, we have deployments at ground handlers and freight forwarders in terms of Cargo Eye. So I would say that we start getting information as soon as the cargo comes to the freight forwarder. That is the closest. But during my chat with you a while back, I told you about a multitude of types of Cargo Eye we have, different form factors, different pricing models, and different accuracy ranges. So for example, the low end ones are the ones we want to push downstream as much as possible. For example, towards at the shipper. So imagine you have a SME, which is sending out shipments to the freight forwarder. They can have a handheld device or another system where they can already capture the image of the cargo and the rough dimensions of the cargo. We don't need it to be very accurate. At the ground handler, we need it to be very accurate because we need to also see if there is a revenue leakage. But at the shipper end, it is enough to have crude dimensions and a good picture of the cargo, because our machine learning algorithms can already extract a lot of information, which we can start using for planning. So this basically then helps the entire value chain. And in order to connect the value chain, we are trying to establish our Speedcargo cloud, where different products at different parts of the value chain push information to the same cloud.
Tell us about your partnership with Microsoft for 3D vision technologies and Google for robots.
So Microsoft, we have a very long history with Microsoft. And when we started building the Speedcargo technology, we looked around what are the sensors out there. And we very, very quickly realized that the Microsoft time of flight sensors, the Azure sensors, are the best in the market in terms of the quality and the price. And this including the comparison with industrial sensors. The Microsoft sensors are the best. So we have been in a partnership with Microsoft where we have received early access to this technology. So we had the sensors with us even more than 18 months before they were launched in the market. And that kind of interaction with Microsoft continues. So they are helping us a lot with the sensing so that we can focus more on the application and less on getting the sensors more accurate. But we also get visibility into the plans of Microsoft in terms of sensing, the sensing technology, so that we can align our product development roadmap. So that is about the sensor. But on the other side, we are also getting a lot of support in terms of the Microsoft Azure cloud platform. Not just the basic cloud, but the new features on the cloud, like the IoT Edge, IoT Hub, which helps us scale the Cargo Eye system in the customer's network. And we also get a lot of support from the most advanced cloud experts at Microsoft in terms of our product roadmap. So this is on the technology side, but we are also Microsoft B2B partner. So we are in the Microsoft partner program, which means if any big company or small company in the Microsoft global network requires technology, we become visible to them. Yeah. So for example, we are Microsoft co-sell ready. So you can today buy Cargo Eye on the Microsoft App Stores, which is only for B2B players, but also on the Azure Marketplace. So that is the kind of support. And also when we are trying to scale out of Singapore into the global market at different areas, we get access to the Microsoft ecosystem in terms of systems integrators, distributors, etc.
And what about the Google for robots?
So Google, we have had a very, very long history, more than 2 decades working with. So Google is a very silent, but a very big player in the high-scale robotics industry. So if you go to a Audi or BMW plant, you will have hundreds of robots working, but these robots are sitting on platforms which move the robot itself in a very high precise manner. And most of these are 9 out of 10 times these are Google systems. So Google is a very advanced and high-scale gantry robot manufacturer in the world. They are the market leaders, and they are based out of Switzerland. And we have been working with them on the robotics side for many years and throughout the Speedcargo project. And last year we agreed that we will take the cargo arm product to market together, because Speedcargo as a startup, we are very, very good at software. And we want to be lean. We want to work on the software, but we don't have experience in terms of taking very large capex intensive projects, high risk projects, project management. But this is what Google and Google systems do on a day-to-day basis. They build big lines for Mercedes-Benz or BMW. So they understand the hygiene factor is very high and the systems integration not very high. So basically, they will front the cargo arm projects in terms of material handling projects, while Speedcargo comes in with the most important part, which is the software, and which is also the high value part. So as a strategy, we want to be a lean startup, providing the highest value to the projects. And so we take the software part, while the project management, the hardware and execution of the large scale projects will be done by Google.
And do you have any prototype already ready for the cargo arm?
So we already have a prototype which is past the POC stage at SATS. It's installed in the SATS warehouse. And currently we are working with Google and another company on a formal project. But because of COVID, things have become a bit slow. But probably in the next 2 years, it should, you can see it deployed in a real environment.
Tell us about the Cargo Eye and Cargo Mind, how they are commercially applied, where are they deployed, who are your customers, how the trials are going on now.
Some of the large B2B players in the ground handling space, currently we are already engaged in commercial relationships, are SATS and Denata. We will soon start projects with Swissport. On an airline side, we are working very closely with Air France KLM and Emirates, and Singapore Airlines, of course, because they are partners. And our next major projects will be in Dubai, because whatever we have done and successfully demonstrated for Dinata Singapore is currently being we are working towards scaling it to Dubai, to Emirates Dubai, and Speedcargo, Emirates Speedcargo Dubai, and Dinata Dubai. So that is basically in terms of Cargo Eye and Cargo Mind. But we are also working with multiple freight forwarders. For example, we have installations at XPO Logistics, which is basically the 3PL side of the air freight. We are currently working on a deployment with DHL in Singapore, and we have interest from Flexport in Hong Kong, Cathay Pacific in Hong Kong. So there are a lot of people, also Maman Group in Israel. So there are a lot of projects which are in the pipeline. Hopefully, the COVID travel restriction will ease out soon. So that is basically currently holding us back.
Finally, tell us about your plans for the future growth, scale up of your operations. Because you mentioned already about some of the new customers and investment and funding. You need a lot of money to really scale your business.
We are only 6 months into operations as a company, and we just closed our seed stage round in March. So we have an investor on board, Blue Incube Ventures, and which is also a venture builder. And one of our key investors are Enterprise Singapore, which is the government of Singapore. So the money which we have raised as a first round is basically for the main objective of deploying our technology at multiple ground handlers and freight forwarders, not many, but few, and show that the proof of value is verified, by the customer. So this has, to a certain extent, already happened because we have paying customers in terms of, both for Cargo Eye and Cargo Mind in form of Dinata. But now we have to replicate it. We can't just do it at one location. So the next 18 months are basically to get some big projects going in, some like a couple of ground handlers, airlines, and forwarders across the globe. So this shows that the business is working. So that is our main agenda. So we are also building up the team to hit this milestone. And while we are trying to hit this milestone, we will try to be prepared for our next fundraise, which is in 18 months. And that will be for the scale up. So that will be our Series A funding. So we have already investors interested in the Series A participation, but it's a bit too early for us at the moment.
Suraj, it was such a pleasure talking to you. Great insights into how automation and robotics are changing the future of logistic industry.
Thank you, Reggie. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And I hope to talk to you again soon.
That was Dr. Suraj Nair, founder and chief technology officer of Speedcargo Technologies. I hope you enjoyed watching this interview. Give us a like and share this video with your friends and colleagues. Also, if you are not a subscriber of our YouTube channel, please do subscribe now and click the bell icon so that you do not miss any of our new videos. Join me next Thursday for a fresh and a new episode of Logistic Tech Dialogues presented by Kale Logistics Solutions. Until we meet next Thursday, take good care and be safe. Thanks for watching.